The Edison format might be one of the best ways to play retro Yu-Gi-Oh! If you're unfamiliar with the name, Edison is considered to be part of the Time Wizard formats, which consists of many older formats and essentially is a snapshot of the game as it existed at one point in time. Named after the 75th Shonen Jump Championship held in Edison, New Jersey, utilizing the March 2010 ban list, this format was peak Yu-Gi-Oh! For me, and is one of the most popular retro formats after the GOAT format. If you played Yu-Gi-Oh! Around this time, you might have played what could be considered Edison format. To begin, as stated before, this format utilizes the March 2010 ban list. Also, cards that have seen errata changes since 2010, such as Brain Control and Sangan, use their pre-errata text in this format. We're looking at you, Necro Valley. Unlike modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, which tends to focus on building up an impenetrable board state through many card search abilities and extra deck monsters, and utilizing powerful and consistent engines to give you repeated results, and setting up multiple ways to negate your opponent's plays, Edison allows for a lot more interplay. You could have turns where you play multiple cards, summon multiple monsters, and you could still interact with your opponent's cards more easily. This format immortalized a point where synchro monsters were just getting going, with such format staples as Black Rose Dragon, Stardust Dragon, and my personal favorite, Brionac Dragon of the Ice Barrier, who were all generic synchro monsters with powerful abilities. These cards were mainstays in nearly all decks, but that didn't mean that there weren't outs to these cards. Cards like Dimensional Prison, Solemn Judgment, and Bottomless Trap Hole all offered potent removal to deal with most threats. The game felt more like old school Yu-Gi-Oh!, and really you could play just about any kind of deck that you wanted to. Combo decks, aggro, mid-range, control decks all had some form of representation in Edison, making it one of the most diverse formats. Some of the best decks at the time were Blackwings, a deck that focused on swarming the battlefield with cards like Blackwing Boro the Spear, which could be special summoned if you controlled another Blackwing monster, and Black Whirlwind, which could ensure that you maintained hand advantage while you extended. Machina Gadget, a machine-heavy deck that focused on the three gadget monsters, Red Gadget, Yellow Gadget, and Green, who each searched for one another, ensuring that you would always have a normal summon available. The deck was more beatdown aligned, using powerful Anthem abilities like Solidarity to give 800 attack points to boost your monsters, and finishers such as Limiter Removal that doubled all of their attack. My personal favorite, Quickdraw Dandy Warrior, was a synchro deck that centered around Dandelion and Drill Warrior. Quickdraw Dandy Warrior was actually the deck that took the win for the original SJC Edison tournament, piloted by Jeff Jones. One thing to note is that in the years since SJC Edison, the format has continued to be developed using the card pool that was available at the time, and as a result, we technically have two different Edison formats that are drastically different. Edison that it was played at the SJC event, and then the modern version of Edison as it's grown and changed since. I want to briefly walk you through my Quickdraw Dandy Warrior deck, though my personal variant is slightly different from the original Jeff Jones list. Let's start with one of the namesakes of the deck, Dandelion. Dandelion has an effect where when it's sent to the graveyard from anywhere, you create 2 fluff tokens, which are each 1-star monster tokens in defense position. These tokens cannot be used as a tribute for a tribute summon during the turn in which they're summoned. This wording gives Dandelion a great number of applications. We are deep in the Synchro era, and so while 2 fluff tokens cannot be used for a tribute summon, it says nothing about them being used as synchro material for a synchro summon. Now let's look at Quickdraw Synchron. This 5-star machine tuner has a special ability where you can send 1 monster card from your hand to the graveyard to special summon the Quickdraw Synchron from your hand. Additionally, this monster can be used as a substitute for any Synchron tuner monster for synchro monsters that require a specific Synchron as material. The main synchro monster of this deck and the other namesake is Drill Warrior. This is a 6-star synchro monster with 2400 attack and 2000 defense. Once per turn during your main phase, you may permanently have this monster's attack points to allow you to attack your opponent directly this turn. Also, once per turn, you may discard a card, and if you do, banish this card until your next standby phase. Upon your next standby phase, you return the Drill Warrior to play and add 1 monster from your graveyard, such as Dandelion, back to your hand. This provides you with a tremendously versatile resource loop that can prove to be very successful. The main line of this deck is discarding a Dandelion to special summon Quickdraw Synchron. You summon the 2 fluff tokens. You use one of the fluff tokens in the Quickdraw Synchron to synchro summon Drill Warrior. You can then discard a card to banish the Drill Warrior on your second main phase after attacking, and then when it returns on the following turn, you get to return the Dandelion from your graveyard back to your hand to use again. You can also utilize Dandelion in conjunction with something like Debris Dragon, who upon its summoning lets you return a monster with 500 attack or less from the graveyard to play. Dandelion is an ideal target for this effect. This allows you to synchro out a level 7 dragon, such as Black Rose Dragon, a great option to clear the battlefield, or Ancient Fairy Dragon, a great way to eliminate problematic field spell cards like Necro Valley. My personal variant utilizes the card Volcanic Shell, a monster with the unique ability that you can activate while it exists in the graveyard. You can banish a copy of Volcanic Shell that's in the graveyard to add another Volcanic Shell from your deck to your hand. You could send this card from the hand to the graveyard to then special summon the Quickdraw Synchron, and then adding another shell to your hand, normal summon it, allowing you to go into Drill Warrior another way. Now because Dandelion is a plant type monster, we have some searchability through Lone Fire Blossom, which can be used to bring out a copy of Dandelion or Titanio, Princess of Camellias for some generic plant support. This is largely the main engine of the deck, though we have a powerful core of support cards to go alongside of this. Staple cards such as Kai's the Shadow Monarch, Raikou Lightsworn Hunter, and Super Nimble Mega Hamster provide flexible removal and board presence. Some variations of this list use Light and Darkness Dragon, which provides several negates to deal with literally anything your opponent does, negating spells, traps, and monster effects. It's important to note that this card can and will negate your own cards while it has the ability to negate, so be careful with playing it. Gore's Emissary of Darkness is solid protection against your board being wiped, letting you drop it into play in the event of a direct attack on the condition that you control no other cards. You then get a Gore's token to match the damage you took, and you've effectively recovered from the attack quite well. Card Trooper can be a means to ditch cards into the graveyard, possibly milling you a Dandelion or a Volcanic Shell for later use. Lastly, we have a core of Battle Fader, Sangan, and Morphing Jar to provide some staple consistency, giving us additional answers to attacks, search potential, and hand advantage. Our spells consist of Pot of Avarice, a solid way to recycle cards sent to the graveyard. If we have 5 or more monsters in the bin, we can return 5 of those back to the deck and then draw 2 cards. Book of Moon and Mystical Space Typhoon offer classic responses to opponents' cards. Heavy Storm clears out back rows. Foolish Burial can help set us up with a shell in the grave or pitch a Dandelion to get us those tokens. Lastly, Brain Control can steal an opponent's monster, which we can then use to synchro summon. For trap cards, we have Bottomless Trap Hole, Dimensional Prison, Mirror Force, and Torrential Tribute to help remove threats. Solemn Judgment is our Omni-Negate trap, and Call of the Haunted can be used to revive a monster. Finally, Starlight Road protects us from something like a Heavy Storm, a Black Rose Dragon, or some other arbitrary hate. For our extra deck, we are on a lineup of staple synchro monsters. Ancient Fairy Dragon helps us deal with field spells, which we're beginning to see heavy use at this time, especially from decks like Ancient Gears or Gravekeepers. Black Rose Dragon can be used to clear the entire battlefield upon summon, as at this point, priority was still a function in the game, allowing you to summon the dragon, and then before an opponent could respond with something like a Bottomless Trap Hole, you can activate the Black Rose Dragon's effect. Iron Chain Dragon gave us some generic level 6 dragon synchro support to take advantage of Debris Dragon. Red Dragon Archfiend and the Stardust Dragon are here as well as powerful level 8 synchros. My personal build utilizes 2 copies of Stardust Dragon since we have the Starlight Road to help bring out Stardust. Lastly, our lineup uses Turbo Warrior, Nitro Warrior, and Junk Archer as alternate uses for our Quickdraw Synchron. 2 Chimera Tech Fortress Dragons finish off our extra deck, and while we don't run any Cyber Dragons in the main deck, we do see Cyber Dragons frequently enough in the format to warrant their inclusion. See, this monster could be summoned utilizing opponent's monsters, and so you could use this as a means to clear off your opponent's machine-heavy field. Some decks include a copy of Cyber Dragon in their side deck so that they can side it in during relevant matchups. This deck is really what got me back into Edison, having played it once back in its prime, and recently having rebuilt this deck while building up my Edison Cube. The deck is fun and it can have some explosive plays, but it isn't quite so overpowered that no other deck can combat it. You do run into some gritty matchups or get bad draws, and so not every game will play out the same. If you're looking to get into Edison, a Quickdraw Dandy Warrior deck can really help you get a solid feel for what the format has to offer. It doesn't quite see as much play these days, with a Blackwing variant called Vayu Turbo becoming much more popular at the moment, but it can still hold its own against the other decks. This format can also be built into for cheap with many decks being around $100 or less for a top tier deck, depending on the rarity of the cards you choose. If you want to learn more about the Edison format, I will link to the official website as well as the format library, a website that breaks down just about every format and is a great resource for exploring non-advanced formats. These links will be in the description of this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, likes and shares are greatly appreciated. Subscribe if you're new, and until next time, I'm Flynn.